NASA. Hey, man, you know, they film all that stuff in a Hollywood studio. We really didn't go to the moon. Anyway, folks, I'm tired, so we'll be back next week figuring it out. Thank y'all for sitting here.
The moon is a place for the guards to be sure that we don't escape or don't get away while we're on Earth maturing our souls. It doesn't just happen, it's written the exact second that we're going to die. Am I going to leave a message for my family to open on my demise about what I've discovered? I think it's pretty well out there what I've discovered. I hadn't thought about it. Maybe I'll give it some thought and leave some kind of message like that. The message is pretty scary. It's hard to tell people that you're owned lock, stock, and barrel by the ETs. You don't do anything that they don't know about, haven't directed and personally guided. We're done everything that they have told us to do. Now, as we walk through the path of life, sometimes if things aren't going too good, that means we're on the wrong path. Everything has been predetermined. It's all been written. There should be no variation. You get off the path, you're gently guided back onto the path to the living with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed.
What is that? The truth.
Every time a new baby is born, the Federal Reserve issues a secret birth certificate printed by a company called the American Bank. That way, the government can use people as currency to back the debt they have with the World Economic Forum, which owns the central banks of every nation on Earth. But the WEF is just a front for the Council on Foreign Relations, which masterminded the 9/11 attacks as a pretext to invade Iraq, take the oil, and install fast food chains to make people slow, fat, and easily abductable by the shape-shifting reptilian aliens it works with. Now, back in the 30s, FDR made a deal with these reptilians to exchange people for technology. That was the basis of the New Deal. But ever since, they've been slowly replacing all the world leaders to create a nuclear holocaust to make global warming real for their takeover. That's how they made up the Cold War, by sending Leica to space to bite Neil Armstrong while Kubrick was faking the moon landing. Now they're using satellite waves, contrails, and measles vaccines as mind control and fluoridating the water to keep people's gold fillings intact so they can be sent back to, you guessed it, the Federal Reserve, where all the gold and birth certificates are stored by the real puppet master, the world monarch, who is himself only the servant of the all-seeing eye who controls everything in the world.
The aliens, they don't want to harm you. They want to take you up. They want to make sure everything is going on with your body, okay? So what they do is they'll come down and they'll freeze time to pick you up. They take you up when you're 1, 3, 9, 11, and 13. After that, they don't take care of you anymore. But what they do is they put you in their ship and they take you up there and they, they make sure everything's running right in your body. And if everything's not running right, they're gonna fix it. Like I had a little cramp in my leg the other day, and I think it was 9. And I woke up the next morning, it was gone. Just cramp was gone. My belief is, I do believe that they took me up there and they worked on my leg. They helped me out.
Is that an artificial moon?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So's our moon. Our moon's artificial, completely artificial. It was brought here from Ursa Minor, apparently between 11 and 12,000 years ago.
For the purpose of
being a satellite in a base, which they evacuated some time ago, but it's now being operational again. And I covered this in the series of 8. It came from a star system called Chata. That's for a word. That's the word they used, Chata. And it was the 17th planet out of a solar system that had 21 planets, and it was one of 4 moons. And it was brought here. It is older than the Earth. There are ruins all over it. There are bases underneath it. It's everything that we're told that it isn't. So that's a whole unique story unto itself.
Craft, and they gave the finger.
Okay, they were parked around the side of the crater.
okay? They were not parked on it, they were floating above it.
Okay, yeah.
So there were hundreds of these 9-foot reptilian guys standing with their legs.
Hundreds.
Yeah, they were all the way across the underneath their vehicles,
Okay,
standing
so
on the
9
crater.
feet, and what do they look like?
They're ugly looking lizard, alligator type people. They got the same skin as the lizards got, okay? And terrible looking faces. But then they have the ability to shift and look like a human. All of them do, okay?
Okay, do you think Von Braun was a reptilian?
No,
You really don't?
no.
Okay.
Your president, yes.
Oh, which one? George Bush Sr.? Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Bill Clinton and this guy you got just got
Obama?
rid of. Yeah.
Yeah,
They all were,
right.
okay? So, and they all have this ability to make themselves look like real good-looking people.
And you're saying Trump isn't one?
No, he's not,
Well,
okay?
that's a relief.
And and he knows more about this subject than people realize.
Oh,
okay?
excellent.
But trying to get back to your earlier question, these groups of extraterrestrial who work together but are at war with other extraterrestrials, okay, have these vehicles that look like a planet,
Right.
like our moon is a vehicle. It's a command center for this arm. The easiest way to look at this is to put your arm out like this, and you be the center of the galaxy.
It's not your moon, and it's not even a moon.
Do you know for a fact which one of these extraterrestrials manufactured our moon and put it in position?
I don't know. I think that's another one of our questions that we need to get an answer to. It doesn't rotate. It stays there looking at planet Earth. It's a vehicle for control. So when we got to the moon, the astronauts took their cameras and rotated all the way around, 360 degrees, looking out at the rim of the crater. You never saw the enormous vehicles parked above the crater. You also didn't see the reptilians standing on the surface underneath their vehicles, giving the astronauts the finger.
Reptilian humanoids, were they literally raising their middle third finger because humans would understand that was FU?
I'm sure that's what it was.
Well, did anybody show you a photograph of the reptilians on the moon?
What we saw were numbers of vehicles, very, very large. And so, yeah, we got there, but then we got chopped off again. It's for their missions, not ours. It isn't our planet. The planet belongs to them. It's a laboratory, and it's their laboratory.
But who is the there that owns Earth?
You're back to the $64 question again. We're dealing with thousands of extraterrestrials, so it's probably a collective. But certainly the Dracos and the reptilians are part of that control, but it's not specifically their control.
That the Dracos and the reptilians can be defeated by something that is more powerful?
Yes.
And what is that which is more powerful?
There is the various organizations out in the galaxy. We're talking...
Since our interaction with the aliens began, we have come into possession of technology beyond our wildest dreams. A craft named Aurora exists at Area 51, which makes regular trips into space. It is a one-stage ship called a TAV, or Trans-Atmospheric Vehicle. And it can take off from the ground using a 7-mile runway, go into high orbit, return on its own power, and land on the same runway. We currently have and fly atomic-powered alien craft at Area S4 in Nevada. Our pilots have made interplanetary voyages in these craft and have been to the Moon, Mars, and other planets aboard these craft. There is a group of pilots at the base who wear a patch, which has a little alien peeking over the bottom. It has, I think, 3 or 4 letters at the top. I forget what they are, but John Lear knows what they are. There is a picture of Saturn and a picture of Mars in the photograph. And in the background, there are 7 stars, which are strangely shaped just like the stars in the Pleiades group. What that means, I don't know. We have been lied to about the true nature of the moon, the planets Mars and Venus, and the real state of technology that we possess today at this very moment. There are areas in the moon where plant life grows and even changes color with the seasons. And this seasonal effect is because the moon does not, as claimed, always present the exact same side to the Earth or the sun. There is an area that wobbles in and out of darkness on a seasonal basis, and it is near this area that the plant life grows. The moon does have a few man-made lakes and ponds upon its surface, and clouds have been observed and filmed in its atmosphere. How many of you remember the period of time, several years, when almost every reported alien craft that was reported landed was on or near water and appeared to be pumping water into the craft? How many of you remember that? Quite a few. The water went to the moon, ladies and gentlemen, to change the moon. And it is working. It possesses a gravitational field, and man can walk upon its surface without a spacesuit, breathing from an oxygen bottle after undergoing decompression the same as any deep-sea diver. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can come from 1,200 feet underwater to the surface through decompression, you can go from the surface to 1 atmosphere of vacuum. See, vacuum does not cause a problem for the human body. It's the inert gas that's dissolved in your tissues and in your bones and in the fluids in your body that causes you the problem. If this is decompressed properly, you will have no problem. All you need is a very small amount of oxygen, a very small pressure to breathe. You will suffer no harm, except for one thing, that oxygen becomes toxic after breathing it over a long period of time. Therefore, excursions would have to be of a minimal time length. Other than that, there is no reason why you or anyone else cannot walk on the surface of the moon or in space in a vacuum without a spacesuit. How do I know? I used to be one of the world's experts on deep sea mixed gas breathing mixtures for divers and on deep saturation diving. When I was the head of the department of the Mixed Gas Deep Saturation Diving Division of the College of Oceaneering. And I can tell you now, it's much easier to decompress to a vacuum and walk on the surface of the moon than it is to bring a man up from 600 feet.
Everyone left the facility, left the darkroom, except this airman second class and myself, and we're in waiting for someone to come to remove this piece of equipment. So while I'm in there, I said to him, and I'm really fascinated with this process, how did they get the images from the lunar orbiter to the laboratory here? And he went through the whole process, describing how the various radio telescopes around the world were linked, and they telemetered the data into Langley Field. And at the time, I didn't know what the real purpose of this darkroom and this operation and this facility was. I thought this was where they were bringing the data in and then releasing the images to the public. I had no idea that there were other issues involved in this facility. So he starts telling me all of this information, and I knew that what we were doing was classified anyway, and that he could only share a certain level of what he was doing with me because of the compartmentalized nature of our jobs. At any rate, he told me how everything worked. He showed me the equipment where the digital information came in, where it was converted to photographic images. They were doing 35 millimeter strips of film at that time, which were then assembled into 18.5 by 11 inch mosaics, they were called. There was a digital signature and a grayscale on every 35 millimeter strip. And those strips were from successive passes around the moon. And they would take and build up a photograph. They would scan one section of the moon, then another and another, and then they would get a larger image. So this mosaic then would be put in that contact printer, and that was then a print that was issued to whomever, the press, the scientist, whatever, wherever that was intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers, and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So I didn't say any more to him because I was concerned again that somebody was going to come in at any moment, would catch us having this conversation, and we would be in real trouble. I was a little irritated, that the government had been lying about all of this for years and covering it up, and I felt it was time to get beyond that. There's a lot more weight to this than I realized. A lot more cover-up than I realized. Yeah, a lot more deception than I realized was going on. Well, some of the shapes, as I said, some of the buildings were very tall, thin structures. I don't know how tall they were, but they must be very tall.
Did you see profile shots of them?
I saw
angular shots with shadows?
They were angular shots with shadows. There were spherical and domed buildings, that were very large. They must be, half a mile in scale, because they were in relationship to the scale of the photograph. They stood out very clearly. They were large objects. It's interesting because I tried to relate them in my own mind to structures here on Earth, and they don't compare to anything that you see here in scale and structure. They're similar to a degree. I tried to relate them to metal structures, and I couldn't see a metal definition. They're more like a stone structure, but a fabricated stone. Some of the buildings seem to have very reflective surfaces on them. A couple of structures that I saw reminded me of cooling towers at power generating plants. They had that sort of a shape. Some of them were just very, very straight and tall with a flat top. Some of them were round. Some of them looked like a Quonset hut, with a domed kind of, like a greenhouse.
And all of these buildings were clustered together centrally?
The particular shot that I saw, there were several clustered together over a landscape, a fairly large landscape. Mm-hmm. There was one building that had a dish-like shape to it, but it was very large. It looked like a radar dish, but it was a building. It could have been a radar dish. There was another building near it with a truncated top, with an angular top that was truncated. I didn't want to look at it any longer than that because I felt that my life was in jeopardy. Do you understand what I'm saying? I would love to have looked at it longer. I would have loved to have had copies. I would love to have, said more about it or discussed it more, but I knew I couldn't. And I knew that young fellow who was sharing this was really, really overstepping his bounds at that point. I felt that he just needed somebody to talk to. He hadn't discussed it, couldn't discuss it, and he wasn't doing it for any ulterior motive other than the fact that I think he had the weight of this thing on him, and it was distressing to him.
Well, as far as the gravity on the moon, we're going to talk about the Boyle-Aldous-Newton law of inverse square, and we're going to talk about how usually NASA convinces you using Newton's gravitational law, which assumes the mass of the Earth and the moon. That's not what you want to use. you want to use Borealis-Newton law of inverse square, because you don't have to care what the mass is. All you need to know is what the distance is and where the neutral point is. If we know where the neutral point is, the size of the planets, we can figure out what the gravity is. Now, we know what the neutral point is because, number one, Wernher von Braun told us. Number two, the crew of Apollo 17 told us. And three, and one of the other Apollo missions told us. And it's about 38,000 or 39,000 miles. And if you work out the law of inverse square, it comes out to be the moon is 64% gravity of the Earth. That's all there is to it. You don't have to assume mass. I think a lot of this stuff is true, but how would I know? I've never been to the moon. I'd like to go. Mm-hmm. If I go and somebody can arrange a ride, like Bob Lazar, he says he's going to have his spacesuit on while we're standing, in the airlock there. And when it comes up like that, he says, at least I'm going to have some air, and I'll watch you suffocate. And I said, no, I'll be able to breathe normally. Now, when people go to the moon, it takes them 2 weeks of decompression before they can actually go out and spend some time there. The fact is, you can go right there and breathe, but you'll get altitude sickness. Just like if you go to climb Everest, you can go right up there. You'll probably live, but you'll hurt pretty bad. That's why they go to the different camps as they go up, is to get acclimatized. And the same thing to the moon. It takes about 2 weeks.
Okay, so tell us how the moon got where it is, because you know that the moon is a satellite that's actually a fake.
Right. It's a spaceship. It was towed into orbit, I would say, 30 to 40,000 years ago. Now, the reason I say 30 to 40,000 years ago is because it's still within the history of man. Velikovsky talks about the different proselenes and the different civilizations that talked about the time when there was no moon, and then when there was 2 moons, and now we have 1 moon. This guy here, Norm Bergman, wrote The Ringmakers of Saturn. It's an excellent book. Norm Bergman is very qualified, was for 40 years a scientific part of both NACA and also Lockheed. Retired from Lockheed, I think, about 15 years ago. No,
What's
more than
NACA?
that. National Aeronautics, the predecessor to NASA.
Oh, really?
National Aeronautics Commission, Aeronautics, I think.
I see, okay.
They were the predecessor to NASA.
Okay.
But when he retired, he somehow got some photos, some really good negatives of Voyager, which went by Saturn. And he's set up a little lab in his house, and he started looking these. And he ended up writing Ringmakers of Saturn, and what he shows you here is what he found in the rings of Saturn is 3 vehicles, spaceships, the biggest of which is 31,496 miles long and 2,422 miles in diameter. We're talking about a fairly large spaceship there. Now, Norm Bergman, when he wrote this book at the beginning, it's very good. He says, now look, he says, I'm going to be talking about some stuff that is very interesting, but you can't skip a page, you can't skip a word that you don't know. You have to go from the beginning to end, or you won't understand what I'm saying. And I did go from beginning to end. Now,
Okay, but when was this written?
This would be 1986.
Okay, so it's not that old.
No. And I go see Norm.
And it's talking about a huge spaceship.
In the
Who built
rings
the
of Saturn.
spaceship?
Who built them?
Yeah.
We don't know who built them. But anyway,
Us?
no. We couldn't build anything like that. We have some amazing stuff, but we couldn't do that.
Okay.
No, this is somebody else. But what the interesting part in the book, and the reason why we're getting here, is because at the end of this book, he starts talking about the moon and how the moon was towed into orbit, because the people that operate that stuff in Saturn and also Iapetus towed the moon into orbit. And he goes into here and explains exactly why he believes the moon was towed into orbit and how it was, and how they grabbed on to the Mare Orientale.
Who are you saying towed the moon?
Whoever. We don't
place?
know. We don't
so
know.
he doesn't conjecture on who
No.
on what alien race, for example.
No.
I mean, obviously it's an alien race. No. Henry Deacon, our secret source, has also substantiated that the moon was towed into orbit. But have you got an idea what alien race was responsible for that?
No, absolutely not.
None.
What's interesting here, another interesting thing, is I see Norm every year because when I go do the UFO Expo West, which is the only one I do, he lives in Los Altos Hills. And he's writing about Iapetus. And Iapetus is probably a spaceship too. Okay. And so
we got to get in touch with this guy.
You better, because he's on his way out. I saw him last September. He was not well. He was finishing up the book on Iapetus, but he wasn't working on it every day.
Okay, and was he a scientist?
Yes.
Okay, but who did he work for? I mean, in other words, he's government.
Give me a second.
NACA.
Yeah.
I understand that, but in a certain level, he's revealing secret information.
No, as what?
Well, I'm just asking you. Wouldn't this be secret?
No. Thermodynamicist, Douglas Aircraft, 1943-94. Aero Research Scientist, NACA Ames Laboratory, 1944-1956. Lockheed Missile and Space Company. Then I Supervisor Flight Test, 1956-68. Manager Flight Test Analysis, 1958-1962. Manager Test Plans and Direction, 1962-63. Manager Re-Entry Test Operations, 63-64.
Okay, but
there's all this stuff, how qualified this guy is.
Right. Why are they letting him talk?
Why
are they letting him do this? I mean,
what's he saying? There's a spaceship that's 31 miles long in the rings of Saturn.
Plausible deniability is...
Sure. Who's going to believe that?
Okay. All right.
So anyway, 2 years ago at the UFO Expo West, I mean, that was so interesting because, number one, one of my lectures was Apollo 1 and the 4 people that were in it. And there was Grissom, White, and Chaffee, and then there was a 4th guy, and he was part of the secret astronaut corps. And the reason they had to keep it secret is because if the public were allowed to know there was a 4th guy in there, then they would not want to know who he was. And there was no possible way that NASA could ever reveal that there was another guy in there, because they would have to reveal the secret space program. And the secret space program started in 1959, and they're the ones that went to the moon in 1962. They went to Mars in 1966. Everything we know is a cover for the secret space program.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, when I give a lecture, if I have 2 hours, I always give an hour and then let the public talk to me for an hour, because I'm going to learn more from them than they are going to from me. And one of Chaffee's relatives got up and said, "John, you're right. We've always known this. There was a 4th man, but we didn't know who it was." Now, I know who the name is, but I keep it to myself, because if somebody comes to me, and says, "I know who it is," I know who it is. And it's really interesting because his son is a current shuttle astronaut.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So anyway, I go to see Norm 2 years ago, and in talking with him, I said, by the way, the electromagnetic vehicle that towed the moon into orbit, where is it now? And he said, I think it's on the backside of the moon. So when I got hooked up with Ron Schmidt, we started collecting photos on the backside of the moon, and we found it. It's in the crater Tchaikovsky. And the story of how we did it was so interesting, and how NASA covered it up. There's, like 6 different photos of Tchaikovsky as they tried to airbrush this electromagnetic vehicle out of the picture by making it an island. But we got them. And we got 2 really good photos. One was discovered by a lady who works for us in Florida, and she discovered it on a thumbnail of Tchaikovsky. And what happened is, when NASA was advertising this particular photo, they airbrushed the big one, but when they had the thumbnail, somebody looked at that and said, "Hey, I'm not going to take the time to enlarge that, take the vehicle out and put it down. Nobody will notice it anyway." But we noticed it, and it's great. And that's where we got the photo of the EMV on the far side, and Apollo 15 flew over it, and they got some movies of it, and it's just a quick shot, but it's really interesting.
The secret astronaut who was killed, his son is a shuttle astronaut.
Correct.
Okay. And this is interesting because it sort of shows how they bring someone into the fold who might have something to tell the world at a later date.
Right.
But if he's a shuttle astronaut, he's not going to talk, right? He's in the fold.
Right. Same thing with Grissom's son.
Oh, really?
He's in the
See,
program.
this would be an interesting investigative angle, would be, what about all the sons and daughters of the astronauts? Do they all work for the company?
Yeah, it would be. Now, Gus Grissom, you know, when the fire started, you know, every single story you read will say that, you know, there's like 3 words spoken. Chaffee said, fire. Somebody said, you know, it's getting hot in here. But in every single story, Grissom doesn't say anything. Now, as you know, Grissom was the most highly critical and vociferous astronaut in that program. He came out, you know, before they were supposed to go up there, he said there's 60 major things with this wrong. How can we possibly be flying this? He's the one that hung the lemon over the Apollo, you know, and NASA hated him. Now, I've been told by guys I consider insiders, and there's another one, call him number 4, that NASA didn't specifically kill those guys, but they let it happen. They knew it was going to happen, and they just let it happen.
But why?
Well, there was a number of reasons. Number 1, they needed more time. They needed to get the program back on schedule, and the only way they could do that was to have a horrendous accident, and they wanted to get rid of Grissom. And so, as you know, the New York Times, and I forget the guy, the story the next day was that he talked to NASA, and they said that the tape was gruesome of the last few minutes. And of course, we've all heard that Grissom didn't say anything. We all know what he said. He was saying, you know, you bastards, you've killed us all. You know, I knew this was coming to this. You know, I hope you all watch us, you know, die. And just really bad. And so I'm sure that's what happened. And I saw another quote just yesterday, I can't remember what it was, about how gruesome the tape was.
Wow. Okay, so where are we going next, John? What do you have?
I don't know. While we're figuring about where we're going next, I just ordered this book. It just accidentally came up there. It's called The Gravitational Force of the Sun by Perry Spalter. It was written in 1993, and basically what it says here, this book is a serious challenge to Newton's law of universal gravitation as presently formulated. And I'm just, you know, this far in it. And basically why that interests me is because Newton did have some ideas about the moon, along with, you know, throughout history, about 36 other people who thought there was gravity on the moon, there was atmosphere, and there was people up there. But each one, you know, the information got gently suppressed.
Well, we have bases up there. That's really what we've been
told? No question about that. We have bases on Mars. You know, the Secret Astronaut Corps has been to visited every planet, most of the planets, and much farther than that. We've been to other solar systems. People, when we talk about other planets, say, well, it's too hot in Venus. No, that's bullshit. The sun is an electromagnetic sphere. It's not a nuclear reactor. And it doesn't radiate heat as such. It radiates electromagnetism. And each planet has its own filtering system. And so the filtering system around each planet determines what the temperature is. So temperature on Venus is, you know, much like Earth, so it is on Mars, so it is on Pluto, so the same on Mercury. There's people just like us on every single one of the planets. The planets that you hear about as being giant gases, like Saturn and Neptune, there's only one gas giant in our solar system, and that's NASA, NASA. That's the only gas giant we have. All the rest of the, you know, planets people live on and happy.
Okay, so what do you think? They're being shrouded? You think there's
we're being suppressed. The information is being suppressed. We're not allowed to know about any of that. The people that Hoagland talk about have taken over, and they consider space their personally theirs, and they don't want to share it with any of us. They have They have technology that we wouldn't have to pay for gas or electricity right this single minute.
Right.
But they don't want to share it with us. It's only for the elite, and we're not included there. We can go to war and and be subjects for weapons and tests and stuff like that, but we are not going to share in that technology. But out there, there's a fantastic universe, fantastic fantastic set of planets. It's really interesting out there. Specifically, the sun, that came from a document in the Branson files. Branton files.
Okay. So have you ever met Branton?
No, but we used to talk a lot, and I'm not sure whether I ever met him face to face. But his name is what? His real name?
I don't know.
I forget his real name, but he's...
Anyway, Dave. I think it's Dave something. But anyway, we used to be real close, and then he got sick for a while, and I don't know what he does. But his information is so interesting, and I have no reason to believe that most of it's not true. Have you read the Branton files?
Oh yeah,
They're
absolutely.
lengthy. I have a 3-inch binder that I had them printed out. Let me talk a little bit about the civilization on the moon, because that's been the thrust of my...
And tell us something about the glass structures that Hoagland's talking about, because he calls it glass. He said it's a special kind of glass, but do you agree with him?
No.
Okay, and why not?
Because he's talking about, I think, the Apollo 14 pictures, and his thrust is those glass structures are domes.
Right.
And those domes are what contain the air. No, the air, it's a thin atmosphere, but as you know, according to Boyle's law, in an atmosphere, the lower it is, the thicker it is. So if you have, and I've had some wonderful drawings I posted, but I don't see them in here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to try and find them so that you can take a picture of them, because they draw exactly what I'm talking about. The air settles into the craters, and if you're in the crater, you can breathe fine. If you get out of the crater, it takes a little longer. But basically, the civilization of the moon starts back at Newton. Somebody has influenced our thought about the moon since the beginning of our thinking about anything. Newton, for instance, he started to venture to say that there might be more mass on the moon, and that's brought out in his 3 books now called Principia. Shortly after Newton died, somebody modified his thoughts to make what is called the Newton law of universal gravitation, which is Fg equals g times m1 m2 over r2. And he didn't come up with that. That was somebody else. He didn't think that you had to specify what the mass was. But anyway, in 1856, there was a Danish mathematician and astronomer named Peter Andreas Hansen. And he proposed, he had been researching the times and the periods of Saturn and several other. He was very knowledgeable. But anyway, he was also looking at the moon. And he had found something strange about the moon, that when you did the predictions on where the moon should be for a particular time, for its particular mass, it was not there. And so in 1956, he went before the Royal Society, Astronomical Society, and proposed that there was a bump on the far side of the moon that was actually, the center of gravity was actually placed 57 kilometers farther out in space than had been generally realized. And for that reason, he thought that there might be atmosphere on the far side, and with this atmosphere, he thought there might be plants, vegetables, and maybe even human life. So he was regarded as a hero and a very interesting guy up until 1870, when a guy named Simon Newcomb came to Paris and told everybody that Peter Andreas Hansen was full of beans, there was not a shred of truth to it, and that even if he was right about these different times, that it wouldn't make any difference. So guess who Simon Newcomb was? He was a Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy and head of the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. The reason people have trouble with an atmosphere on the moon is to have an atmosphere, you have to have gravity. And people think that it's 1/6 gravity, and they've been sold that over the years. Somebody has had an agenda here so that we don't think that there's any gravity on the moon, but there is. And the way it can be proven is by using the Bully-Aldous-Newton law of inverse square, which takes the size of the planets, the diameter of the planets, and the neutral point. The neutral point is that point between the Earth and the moon where the gravity of the Earth exactly meets the gravity of the moon. Now, NASA has traditionally told us that that's 24,000 miles. And if you work out the inverse square law with 24,000 miles, the moon does have 1/6 gravity, but the fact is the neutral point is at 43,495 miles. How do we know that? We know that because Wernher von Braun told us that in 1968. We know that because in 2 of the books of Apollo, including Apollo 17, and there was another Apollo mission, they specifically told, specifically said, here we are at 39,000 miles and and at the neutral point. So we know that it's between 39 and 43,000 miles, and either one of those would work out to be about 60 to 64% gravity Earth. So, having 64% of gravity Earth, it can hold an atmosphere. And people say, well, if it has an atmosphere, how does it keep the atmosphere? Well, the same way the Earth does. They have forests, meadows, lakes, rivers, people, civilizations, and it's on a band of the moon that's just beyond where we can see. And I have a picture here, but I can't find it. But it's on a band, and that's the same band that both Menger and Adamski visited. I'm pretty sure Menger actually went to the moon in 1954. They let him step out of the train and breathe the air. He's 86 years old, living in Vero Beach, Florida. I emailed him the other day to get the exact color of the moon, and if you could reach that picture, I could hold it up. It's behind the cigar box of the moon, the color picture of the...
I'm sorry, John, I don't understand. Oh, the color picture of the moon?
Yeah.
You mean Dawn in the Labyrinth? Sorry, which one are you referring to?
It's the long picture with the yellow sky.
Up at the top? You don't mean on the wall, do you?
No. No, behind the cigar box.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, I see. Those cigar boxes.
I was looking at that.
No, just hand me that photo right there.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I've seen this before. Tell me what this is.
Okay, this is the crater Copernicus, and this is the same photo that's up there, but all I did was put the exact color of the lunar sky. And how do I know that? Because I emailed Howard Menger in Florida, who took a trip there in 1954, and when he looked up into the sky, he said that's the exact color he saw. He describes it as a saffron color, and I sent a number of swatches with different color saffrons to him in Florida, and he marked the X on that particular color. And so I put that color behind the crater Copernicus, and that's the color of the sky.
Why would it be that color? Why wouldn't it be...
We think it's that color because although the atmosphere is not as dense as the Earth, it's higher, and the rays reflecting through the atmosphere will go more towards yellow.
But what you get on high mountains on Earth, for example, is you just get a darker blue. I mean, I know that because I've been there. It would be a different composition of atmosphere in order to create that color effect, surely. It would contain different gases. Do you know anything about that?
No.
Okay.
All I know is it's breathable. He stepped out. He said it was very hot, but not as hot as we're led to believe. And he said you certainly couldn't stand it for very long. But then he looked up and saw that color sky. Now,
Can you tell us something about him? What is his background?
Howard was just a person living a normal life, and they came and, the moon people came and invited him to go up there. He wrote this book called Secrets of the Flying Saucers from Outer Space, One Man's Fantastic Revelations of Visitors from Other Worlds. He has a website. I've read this book several times, as you can see. Here I've highlighted exactly, he says what he did on the moon, where he was taken. There was a lot of other people. He said the place he went, one of the places was like the Valley of Fire in Nevada. He says, there we stopped long enough for our guide to open the door and permit us to stick our heads out for a brief moment, which was all one could take, for it was terribly hot outside, like a blast furnace. I was certain that no one could have lived outside very long and was glad to have shut the door.
So is that maybe a basis for the domes as well? Because you know you can regulate temperature. You can regulate.
Yeah, I'm sure there's small domes. I don't think there's any like Hoagland is saying though. Huge domes all over the place. Here he says, I looked up in the sky. It was a yellowish color. When looking, I had a queer impression that if I walked some distance, I would fall off, since the horizon was so foreshortened. There was other groups with him, along with ordinary folk, scientists, geologists, electronic engineers, rocket experts, astronomers. And
so this guy is, you say, in his 80s at this point?
86. He was 86 the other day.
Have you met him in person?
Not in person, only on email.
But basically, as far as you're concerned, he has no reason to lie, right?
No, because his story is the same as George Adamski's, Truman Bethune, what the government labeled as contactees, which was their way of saying, yeah, well, you know, they're just contactees. And I think both of Adamski and Menger became very important sources for the government. When I first got into this, 20 years ago, and people would say, what do you think flying saucers are real? And I'd say, yeah, but, that George Adamski stuff was all bullshit. It wasn't. It was all real. So was Howard Menger. So was Truman Bethune and Daniel Fry. All those people were telling, the exact truth. But the fact is, if you've been to Living Moon, you've seen the original government papers on who was involved in the anti-gravity project in 1952, and Lear Incorporated, my father's company, is listed right there. And there's a video floating around on the web that shows him at the blackboard teaching scientists at the Bonson Institute how a flying saucer flies. And this was probably 1954 or 1955. But the fact is, we had anti-gravity solved in 1957 or 1958, and we started building our own craft and went to the moon in 1962. And Mercury, Gemini, Apollo was just a cover for all that was really going on. And
now, what do you say about all the NASA pictures, all the Apollo photos of the moon which do not show a saffron sky? What's going on?
Yeah, it always shows pure black, and the reason is they couldn't show the real color. That's why all those photos are so fake. That's why there's no stars there. They didn't have much of a choice, They're trying to say that it's dark, that it's a vacuum. Well, first of all, it can't be a vacuum because Neil Armstrong says he could pick up the dust with his toe, and we all know that a vacuum, the dust will settle into a crust, and you can't pick it up with your toe. And they couldn't show the sky because it was a saffron color, and that would lead everybody to believe there was atmosphere. So I'm not sure whether Apollo 11 went, and here's why. Now, it may have gone to the moon, the command service module, and may have orbited the moon, but the problem I have is they only had 22,000 pounds of fuel, and they went into an orbit that was about 50 miles by about 10 miles. This would be impossible with 64% gravity, but even if it was, from 10 miles they'd have to go down to the lunar surface, land, and then take off with 22,000 pounds of fuel. I don't think that'd happen. I don't think they could do it. That's not enough fuel to do that. Second of all, I have a group of friends that remote viewed Apollo 11, did it land, and they weren't able to see any kind of landing. All they were able to see was it was a CIA cover-up of somehow. The other one is Aldrin's comment, and I'd just like to read from Buzz Aldrin's book.
All the astronauts had some
Pardon?
interesting things to say, didn't they?
The what? Yeah. Here's what Aldrin says when he's asked, how did it really feel to be on the moon? And he bristles, quote, "For Christ's sake, I don't know. I just don't know. I have been frustrated since the day I left the moon by that question."
Yeah, that's amazing.
The fourth reason is the video of the light standard crashing. Now, the one small step for a man. Now, that's been alleged to have been a joke, but if it was extremely well done and very expensive. My opinion is that it was real, that was during the filming, and I based that on little details like the ladder, like the shadows, everything about that tape is real. I think that was a real outtake of One Small Step for a Man. Number 5, the G's required to orbit and deorbit. As you know, the lunar lander had no couches, had no seats, had no chairs. They stood up. They stood up and they had an armrest under here and one under here, and all they had is a little belt that came out from the side and wrapped around them. Now that's not even good for a seat belt. They're called pilot restraints. That's all they had. And you're telling me they came out of orbit at 50,000 feet and landed and then blasted off with an armrest? No, I don't think that happened. And the other is the different ladder in any picture of One Small Step for a Man and photos of the Apollo 11 taken after that show a much thinner ladder, one made of tubular, looks like aluminum, compared to the one in One Small Step that is at least that thick, and it's an L-shaped. So that's my take. Apollo 11, I don't think landed. The others, maybe, but I'm not sure. If they did, if any of them landed, it was with technology that used anti-grav.
That's what we were told. We were told that they had help. Otherwise, they would not have been able to land.
That was the only way they could have done it.
And they wouldn't have been able to get through the Van Allen belts. Do you have any view about that?
I believe that to be true. The only reason I hesitate is because Bob Lazar told me that there was nothing dangerous about the Van Allen belt. But what you say about the Van Allen belt, Sleeper is adamant about. He said nobody can get through that. He said that's a protective layer around the Earth so that we can't get out. The only way that we could get out was with help.
We were told that too from the inside.
And that's what Sleeper is very adamant about that.
Very interesting. Okay. Now, I have to ask you about the standard rebuttal to the atmosphere issue, which was that when you're looking at the moon through a telescope and you see a star, it doesn't twinkle, it's just crystal clear, just like it's always there, and then it suddenly disappears.
People who say that haven't done that. First of all, if you read V.A. Fursoff's book called A Strange World of the Moon, you'll see that there's many instances of occultation. But the fact is, occultation can only occur is if there is some sort of dust or kind of sediment in the atmosphere. Here on Earth, there's all kinds of problems up there. On the moon, it's clear, perfectly beautiful. Depending on the thickness, you may not see occultation. But if you want to read Strange World of the Moon by V.A. Fursoff, he lists at least 14 or 15 astronomers that have seen occultation.
Okay. I want to check my understanding of the issue of the center of gravity of the moon being offset from the center of the moon. Have I understood that right?
Correct. It's 57 kilometers further away from Earth than is normally thought. And of course, that's confirmed by Apollo, too.
That doesn't sound like it's enough to make any difference to anything. That's a very small amount relative to the size of the moon, which is...
Well, of course, we don't know what the moon's made of. We don't know how much you know, how much actual weight that would be, but the fact is that the moon does this, what do they call it, where it spins at the top? Yeah, but what's it called? Libration. Another spaceship moon mystery is its libration. Libration is the spaceship moon's wobble, and this wobble is theorized by mainstream science to be caused by tidal lock. Tidal lock is a nonsensical theory to account for unknown forces, like gravitons to account for gravity. Maybe the spaceship moon's libration or wobble is caused by the rotation of the moon about the location of the gravity B-wave generator, which is located further away from the Earth from the center of the spaceship's moon geocentric center. It's curious to note that one cycle of libration is equal to one period of rotation of the spaceship moon.
Are you saying, therefore, that this is one of the causes for the gravity on the far side of the moon, if you're on the surface, to be greater than it is on this side, and so the atmosphere is on the other side of the moon? Or
Peter Andreas Hansen felt that it was on the other side. But the fact is, if there was more gravity further, it would depend on the altitude whether the air was denser on the far side or the near side. What we don't know for sure is the altitude, the mean altitude. If we knew that, we would be able to tell where the denser atmosphere is. But in any case, the denser atmosphere is going to go to the lower portion. This is a picture of the moon, and this was taken by Lick Observatory. And in any picture of the moon you see, any picture, from way back when up until now, there's a very bright spot up here which is called Aristarchus. You ask NASA or anything about it, they just say it's incredibly white, we don't know what's there or why it's like that. But in fact, last summer we had an astronomer over in England take a picture. If this shows it, we found what we assume is a fission reactor 29 miles in diameter. You can see the dome there, you can see the support sections there, and you can see the blue glow of radiation while the reactor is going.
Absolutely. So this is a nuclear reactor on the moon. It's visible on this side of the moon, right?
Correct. And we've always been told it's just it's whited out on any photo you see. They just take a whiteout and they put it there.
So
but
this
in fact,
is
it's a
incredible.
beautiful.
Now, did you talk to Hoagland about that?
I can't remember whether I did, but I know he wouldn't admit it. This is the Clementine photo. You see how it's been airbrushed? All it is, you know, just lines there.